Dad made me. Blood. Call me stupid then. The emptiness of the Grand Hotel. A red robe, golden slippers, a cigar, and a beer. Guests/freaks. A toast. Confession. What the world spins around, what I remember. Hours later, I awoke to find Hyder sitting at my bedside. He was reading. He looked very mature, sitting on a hard little wooden chair. He looked calm. He sensed my opened eyes and raised his own from his book, some huge Stephen King apocalyptic disaster. He shut the book. The reading lamp next to him spread the only light in the room. It made a cone through the darkness down to the wooden planks of the floor. Hyder's face was shaded dramatically and his brown eyes were bright. The only reason I'm sitting here is because Dad made me, he said, his voice tight as Leonardo's wire. I'm sorry, I said. I'm really sorry. My voice was nasally and high. It's okay, he said, shutting his book. I felt my nose to find it bandaged. It felt like there was a weight on my face. I tasted blood. Sitting up, I quickly wished I hadn't. My head ached and throbbed. Sorry about your nose, he said. I grabbed a bloody white towel that had clearly been used to swab my face. It was sitting on my bedside still. I pressed it to my nose and blew. Blackish red chunks. Small, but still chunks. My stomach did a forward roll. I folded the cloth so I didn't have to look at whatever it was I'd blown out. My brains, maybe. Sorry I went after your balls, I said. I wanted it to sound funny, but it didn't. That's okay. You were really mad. I'd started to lie back down, but when I remembered why I'd been mad, I straightened up again. Blood rushed into my head like some kind of cranial tide. I've got to go see Coach, I said. What time is it? I gingerly touched my temples. Hyder glanced at the bedside clock. The red digital numbers glowed. 9:48. Mom and Dad aren't going to let you leave. They're going to take you to the hospital. They almost already did, but you said you were okay. I said I was okay? I didn't remember that. Well, I need to talk to Coach. That's why I was so mad. I have to tell him it was me. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, said Hyder. You didn't run out of that restaurant without paying. You didn't let the seniors tape Squid to the pole. Call me stupid then. I was out of bed then, picking up my brown corduroys and my green sweater I'd worn to school that day. If you're going, I'll go with you. You don't have to. My head ached badly, to the point that I felt like I might throw up. I know, he said. I'll go anyway. I washed my face and went into Mom and Dad's room. They were both reading and in bed. Dad had his glasses on, Mom too. She had a pen in her hand and was marking sections of her Bible. Dad was reading a Louis L'Amour Western. I'm okay, I started. Mom put down her pen and Bible. Dad laid his book spread open next to him on the bed. Neither spoke. I know you're worried about me, but I feel okay. I'll go to the hospital if you want me to, but I need to stop and see Coach first. It was raining hard when our cars slid up to the curb outside the Grand. The gutters along the streets were swollen. Black water dripped off rooftops and the streets shined. My skull felt full of poisonous, sloshing water. Hyder and I walked in the cavernous old building. Dad drove home. On the way, I had explained what I had to do. Call when you're ready to come home, he said. And he smiled at me for the first time in a long, long time. It felt good, but I still had to find the courage to do what I had to do. I had to finish. The place was even more desolate at night than it had been in the morning. The smell of ancient cigarette smoke filled my nostrils, and I nearly puked. Where's his room? I asked. It's on the 3rd floor, said Hyder. I don't remember the specific number. Let's go find it. As we made our way to Coach's room, I half expected to see translucent spirits floating in the echo-laden stairwells and above the musty, spotted carpet. The place was straight out of a bad ghost story. It smelled of evil doings, like crimes not truly washed away, yet forgotten. I gagged about every 10 seconds. He was standing in the hallway in a red robe when we turned the corner that led to his room. He had a cigar in one hand and a brown bottle of beer in the other. He wore a pair of fancy gold leather slippers and reminded me of a genie. Pointing his orange-tipped cigar at us, he shouted, "Hey!" as if he'd been expecting us. "Great races! I was just celebrating with my guests in this fine residence." He ashed his cigar on the maroon hallway carpet. "Sorry I didn't stick around to shake your hands, but the principal was starting to stiff me out. Perhaps you'll join us." He nodded toward his open door and tipped his beer in that direction. The tinny sound of a television blared out the door. "We can't stay long," said Hyder. He nodded at me. "He has to go to the hospital." "I guess so," Coach said, leaning in toward me. His eyes squinted, a look of sympathetic pain spreading across his face, his big black eyebrows furrowing. "What happened to your nose?" Hyder headbutted me, I said, feeling stupid. Coach's fresh cigar smelled of earth and spices and didn't make me want to puke. The blue-gray smoke spiraled up and disappeared. "Why'd you headbutt him, champ?" "He tried to knee me in the nuts," Hyder replied, matter-of-factly. With good humor, actually. One thing about my brother and me, our fights might be vicious, but once they were over, they were over. Coach stared at me for a second. "You earned it then," he said decisively but not cruelly. "A man shouldn't try to get to another man's jewels." We three pondered that truism for a moment. "Well," Coach said, "moving on. Come in here so I can introduce you to my friends, even if you can't stay long." "Coach," I started. I had to get out what I had to say. I didn't think I could do it with an audience. "Just come in here," he whispered loudly, waving his cigar for us to hurry. "You'll hurt their feelings if you don't say hi." Hyder shrugged. It didn't seem that I had a choice. If I wanted to confess my sins and absolve myself, I needed to do it that night. And I supposed I didn't get to pick and choose my perfect moment. "Just for a second," I said. "And then I've got to talk to you." The room was dingy and small and almost entirely filled by a large iron-framed bed, covered by a thin mattress smack in the middle of it. A crooked little picture of a red, yellow, and purple sunset over a northern lake hung on the wall. Two large windows at right angles in the corner of the room were streaked with rainwater. The night outside was black. A threadbare chair sat beside the bed, wedged between it and the far wall. The chair was empty. Sitting on the bed were Slade, Victor, Swart, Keene, and Bowden. "Look who's here!" shouted Victor, who sat cross-legged with what looked like a beer in his hand. He pointed his brown bottle at me and Hyder. "Number 1 and number 3. A black and white movie flickered on the television Coach had set up on a dresser. There was an image of circus animals, black and white elephants, a giraffe, chimpanzees, all parading across the screen. "Freaks," said Hyder, pointing at the TV. I noticed an unwieldy VCR, bigger than the television, had been hooked up. "One of us! One of us!" chanted Swart as he bounced up and down on his butt like a happy 4-year-old. The bed springs squeaked and complained under him. He took a belt of whatever was in those brown bottles. Several empty pizza boxes covered the few square feet of floor available. "Glad you fellas could make it to our humble little soiree," said Bowden. He also had a cigar in his hand. "I propose a toast," said Coach as he moved to his chair, taking it by the arm and dragging it out from behind the bed. "Hell yes," said Bowden. "I like mine with butter and jam." Swart bounced off the bed and snatched 2 bottles out of an icy chest under the little TV. He cracked them open, each with a pop and a hiss, and handed one to me and one to Hyder. I sniffed at it. It was root beer. "Here's the Bluebirds," said Slade, imitating Coach's East Coast braying. "Without 'em, we wouldn't have made it to regionals." He grinned. "God damn it." "Here, here," said Coach, nodding. He winked at Keene and nodded at my brother and me. Although I was the one who proposed the toast, so I was supposed to be the one to make it. "Hell with you," said Slade, "you old bastard." Slade could do a pretty good accent. I'd have been impressed if I hadn't been solely focused on my impending confession. When we all took a drink, my throat felt like there was a golf ball-sized tumor in it. I'd come here to crumble before my coach. Instead, I'd been caught up in a celebration. "Another toast," said Bowden. "Here's to Coach. Without him, Slade would be dead by now." "That's the truth," said Slade. "Remember that night I slept in your garage? That night my dad was after me with his goddamn belt?" "Buckle in hurts like a bitch," said Victor. We clinked again. "What about my toast?" whined Coach, although I could tell he wasn't really upset. A grin had spread across his face. "I think we ought to hear a toast from number one himself," said Victor. He tapped his stogie, ashing right onto Coach's bed covers. "Hear, hear," shouted Coach, raising his Budweiser. They clinked their bottles and chanted, number one, over and over, happy as they could be in Coach's nasty little dump of a room. The joy in there, the brotherhood, well, it broke my heart. I couldn't help it. I started to cry. The room slowly grew silent, but for the blarings of the television, the dialogue of the old movie playing, something about receipts for the circus, money missing. Coach was the only one who didn't notice the tears on my face. He shouted, Okay, my turn, finally. My toast is. And then he noticed. K1, what's the matter, little man? He set his beer down on the floor. What are you crying for? He clutched the top of his head. Oh, for God's sake, we made regionals. God damn it. Why does someone always gotta ruin my good time? He glared at me. Out in the hallway with it then. The rest of you, carry on.